joy for us to be with you, wonderful people out there, wherever you are, in Guyana, in the Caribbean, in further field. We thank God that you are alive, and that we are alive and we can be with you. We pray that you will be blessed from today's production. We want you to invite a friend. We pray, God, as you stay tuned, your life will be blessed. God bless you.
This evening we want to continue looking at the implications of family meetings. A family meeting serves as a tremendous tool for learning within the family setting, and therefore it is important that as parents we continue to hold such meetings, because the fact of the matter is our children can learn and benefit from the discussions. And when we look at Genesis 49, we see Jacob here holding a meeting with his family and responding to their behaviors. And therefore we want to say to every parent, sometimes we tend to pet our children and we do not make a serious effort to let them know the possible consequences that might be derived from their actions. And so this particular gentleman, he was saying here, if you do A, B, C, D, this will be the consequence or the consequences of your actions. And so sometimes you got to be brutally frank in these meetings and let people know what will be the end result. I remember, not my own family, but I had a meeting with some students of mine. They were like family. I remember telling a particular gentleman in the meeting that if you continue to move down this road, this is what is going to happen to you. I actually told this man in the meeting that I had in the classroom that if you're not mindful with your actions, you can be shot, because your actions, they're terrible, and therefore you might become an obstacle for the police. I never knew that man took cognizance of what I said so seriously. Years later, when he wrote CXC, and he got 4 subjects because he looked as though he wasn't going anywhere. He would not have achieved anything. And he came to me and he said, "Look, sir, at least I got 4 subjects. Police, they ain't gonna shoot me, sir." And I said, no. And so sometimes we gotta be brutally frank with people, because there's a tendency of petting and you just petting and you don't want to talk the truth. And so these meetings serve as a tremendous learning tool, and we hope that as we continue to conduct these meetings, our families will become stronger and our children will grow and blossom. Gentlemen.
This is so important, what you're dealing with, so critical. And sometimes I feel for Jacob in terms of the very tone of his meeting, the context of his meeting. I feel for him that he decided to hold this meeting at the end of his life. We cannot afford to do something like that. I get the impression that Jacob was, he had a score sheet. And every infringement, Jacob didn't believe in yellow cards. In football parlance, he didn't believe in a yellow card. 2 yellows equal a red. Jacob only had red cards. And he didn't sound no warning, didn't blow a whistle. He allowed the game to play. And at the end of the game, at the end of his life, he determined a straight red, boom. I don't recommend this as a template for us to conduct a family meeting. I believe every step of the way, we have to have this kind of conversation and discussion. And when the rules have been broken, when there are violations, and some of the violations are flagrant violations, we have to make a note of those things, and as soon as possible after the violation, bring it to the attention of the perpetrator, and attempt to win them, attempt to bring them back on stream. Jacob, even though he blessed his children, every time I read his words to Reuben, I don't know if he was weeping, but he describes Reuben as his strength. He describes Reuben, this, you were the child of my youth. You were my firstborn. You reserve something for your firstborn. I don't know if he had his, he was gritting his teeth when he was pronouncing this. He said, you are my might and my strength, the beginning of my strength. The excellency of dignity, the excellency of power. I mean, this is so powerful, flattering. And then all of a sudden, it's as though the bottom falls out. Unstable as water. You shall not excel. Reuben lived with that for the rest of his life. You shall not excel. I don't think parents should ever say those words to their children. And I believe we've been given this as an opportunity for us to look at this template and to learn from it. So when you just heard a teacher spoke to a student, trying all the time to get his attention, the student would not respond. But when he said, you know, if you don't change your ways, something serious will happen, that student woke up.
Pastor, that is so significant what you said there. Dealing with issues as they arise in the family situation. Keeping a score sheet is not the way we would want to advocate dealing with issues. The whole aim is to help the children or help the offenders to improve on their behavior. So as we see issues, we need to deal with it. You know, I remember hearing a story when I was a child about a young man who was condemned to be hanged, and the judge, in passing the sentence, asked him if he had a wish, and he said he'd like to speak with his mother, and the judge granted him that wish. She came across to the dock where he was and decided to whisper in her ear. And instead of whispering, he first hit her for ear and said, "Mommy, if you had rebuked me while I was growing as a child, I would not have been here today." The moral of the story is that we need to deal with infraction or infringement as they occur. You don't need to set an agenda that family meetings will only be held on Mondays or only on Tuesdays, and it needs to be held between 9 and 10 o'clock. Because of what we're involved in terms of training, we need to deal with it, whether we're in the car, whether we're walking down the road, whether we're sick, whether we're eating, we need to deal with it. So I want to encourage people today, all of us today, that we need to deal with issues as soon as they arise. And do not use Jacob Fenton.
You know, I believe in a strong human relationships. But I get the impression sometimes in some families, the relationships mean that you bind the love of your children. You pay a price, so you try to be as Uncle as you can. Not that I'm suggesting that Jacob did that, but I find that in our environment, sometimes instead of being balanced and being able to speak to both the negative and the positive of the life of the child, we prefer only to speak to the positive and ignore the negative. And those negatives will grow. They are going to multiply, will become dangerous. Not only dangerous to the individual, but dangerous to the family, dangerous to the community. So the better thing is to address it. And if you genuinely love, you will address it in love. You'll find the need to not to ignore it, but to ensure that you see the positive root of the individual. And I am sure, going around this set, there are quite a few folks who can say, like I have, being able to benefit from the loving rebuke of your parents. And sometimes you don't like it when it comes. Sometimes you don't even agree when it comes. But in time you recognize how powerful and necessary it was. So here it is.
You know, technology has been so good to us. We had a Skype meeting 2 nights ago our eldest son. And one of the things that he shared, he said, I want to apologize to you folks for not cleaning up my room when you instructed me to, for not ensuring that things are in the proper order when you instructed me to. Why did that come about? Because now he's on his own and he's got to make sure that everything is in order. So when you train, when you teach, sometimes your students really don't want to hear what you have to say at that particular point in time. But then time goes by and situation presents itself where that lesson that was taught better be applied, or else they're out in the cold.
There are many times we look and see people going into a house and we believe that they're going into a home, but it's just a house. We see people living together and we assume that it's a family and they're living together, but actually they're living apart. In my own inquiry over the years, I would ask some questions like, for example, this: when last you had a family meeting after 9-10 years of marriage with children? And the answer is never. We don't have that. Well, I want to give you the assurance that that is true. But let me give an example now. All of you, say you're in that state, you eat. Well, turn eating into meeting. While you sit, don't eat apart. There's this habit of, in homes or houses, where when it's mealtime, everyone grab a plate and gone in front of the TV. Desist from that. Have a time, a dinner time or a breakfast time, and sit together and chat, and you will see a difference.
You know what is critical here, even as we examine this issue, I really want us to go back to Jacob and his son Reuben. And I'm wondering, how important it is for parents to truly observe their children and bring to their attention those behaviors that can become harmful to them in the future. As we saw with Reuben. Reuben was the firstborn. It means therefore that he was entitled to the birthright. He was entitled to possessions. He was entitled to leadership authority. But because of the sin he committed, he lost all of that. Could that have been dealt with in the early stages, his father observing his behavior and realizing, if this young man continue along this path, everything that is in store for him can be lost. So it is critical for us to understand as parents, as we raise our children, as we keep these meetings, to observe and to help them to desist from practices that can be harmful to them in the future. Unless, as a parent, there's some ulterior motive, like having a favorite in the family, and you would prefer to see this one excel above the other. That should not be the way we should be going. We should be not impartial, but partial. We should ensure that all of the children benefit the way they ought to benefit, so that things can go down well.
I think what you're saying is that one of the, or a key element of these meetings should be the whole concept of remediation. I know sometimes when people hear remediation, you think schoolwork and so on, but it simply means to remedy. And therefore, as parents, we must constantly be looking for those areas in the lives of our children that would be detrimental to them, and remedy those areas in terms of giving the right kind of direction and instruction, and being very clear as to the consequences of what would be the consequences of the action of that child if that child does not change. And therefore every meeting must be, I think, we should take time to do what I would like to call remediation, because you could remedy behaviors too. You know, you can remedy learning difficulties, yes, but behaviors also, and therefore we must constantly be looking up, because we need a change in the way we see our children operate in society.
I know a father who was raising 2 girls, tried his level best to talk with them and to discipline them, and they listened, but there was no change in their behavior. And so the father became very concerned because the infractions continued. He drove them up the East Coast, one of the villages, opened the door, this is after school, opened the back door where they were seated in his car, and asked them, invited them to get out of the car, and asked them to take their book bag and lunch kit and so with them, and close the door. And then he said to them, if you are my children and you will adhere to the instructions of this family, open the door and come back in. If you are not my children, you remain right there and make your way to your parents. Whoever your parents are, if you don't submit to the rules of this family, and those children, one was weeping, the other one was stoic and remained very much in control. And the father drove off a little, and both of them broke down. Father reversed and asked, what's the position? Yeah. And the children said, well, we belong to you, we are your children, and we are prepared to adhere to the rules of the family. And well, the door was open, and they drove home in silence. The end result of that entire episode, those children toed the line. Now, people beating children, hitting them in the head, and brutalizing them, attempting to reform, attempting to get them to see, change their way, see the errors of their way. Well, in that little 10, 15-minute episode, that lesson was learned well, and they had no more repetition of that kind of behavior.
When we're talking about observation, that's key you're bringing out there, Pastor, the importance of observing, and also the methodology in which we deal with issues. You cannot lump those of us who are blessed with several children. We cannot lump the methodology with which we deal with children altogether. I like what you did. You took them for a drive, which is good. Several parents don't have time to take their children out. You took them for a drive. And you made the point there, not need to beat them, but they understood. I think that it came home to them forcibly. Look, this is the tipping point. You're either for me or you're against me. For me, you're going to come back in the vehicle, if not, you're going to leave. So what needs to be underscored here is the method we use to deal with it.
You know, that's a classic example of what we call an alternative form of discipline. You know, sometimes we believe that you get a lead and a belt and you beat out and so on, and therefore that is going to change. And tell you the truth, for persons to change behavior, you have to actually go into the mind. You know, lashes and so on, you know, will not automatically change. But what you would have done there is a classic example. You know what this for a man always want to go to Princess Hotel because he likes the motorcycle, you know, I'm not advertising by the way. He likes the CBR. And then you say, you will never ever go back and ride that motorcycle until you start to behave. And then for 1 week straight, you know, you see no problems and so on. And so sometimes we got to look for areas that they love and that will impact them if we would have taken away those kinds of opportunities from them.
I love the power of the family. I I can feel how the father felt for his family. I think it is the love of the father for that family that made the father search for alternative solutions, other ways he can get over to the child. But there's one thing that came out in that story that I really will take for the rest of my life. That father really reconnected those children to their family, getting them to recognize not only where they belong, but how they should love and care for. It's a lesson I don't think he will ever forget. And it took the initiative of the parents to actually get the children to that place of their life. And so I pray that we all will take a
Personally, I learned a lesson from that story, because when I heard it, I heard that the father took the children, and I'm asking myself, where was the mother? Sometimes it would have been possible that the mother would not 1 minute approve of that methodology. Immediately she said, what you doing? And she herself might have stepped out of the vehicle and said, well, you could belong. But sometimes it is necessary that a man has got to do what a man has got to do. And we say that, you know, there's a colloquial statement now. But it is important that even though you are parents, at times the mother must take some kind of initiative. The father must take some kinds of initiative. I am sure that afterwards it was discussed at the family meeting.
Oh, sure, I can inform you. I've been advised that that meeting took place. You know, personally, it's interesting how that story came across, you know. But personally, my car was used as the counseling room. Once I was at home in Guyana, I'm not having an assignment overseas, I took my children to school. It was a joy. Drove them, and I was assured that I was determined to pick them up. Now, that was very important, setting the tone for the day. In the meeting. There was no loud music, and they could hear me. I have listened to my children, who are all now adults, said, many mornings, we just wanted you to shut up, Daddy. Because, I mean, you were on it. I knew what I was doing. I was setting the tone. And I know devotions are powerful, but then we have to marry principles with life. We have to be able to sit with them. We have to be able to have them understand. And they were happy to say at the end of each day, good morning, Dad. But what you're doing, you're laying line upon line, word upon word, precept upon precept. For me, I'm proud, and I encourage them to do the same thing to their family, to raise them in that kind of environment.
You know, sometimes as parents, instead of we have meeting with them and train them, we want to spoil them. But here we clearly see that Jacob, even though Reuben was the firstborn and he believed all was set for him in life, sometimes as parents, we want to give our children everything they need, and they do not know the value of anything because we did not train them to work hard. So easily come, it went the same way. So we want to say that Jacob recognized that this man, his character was failing him. And then his sinful attitude, I would say, dethroned him from what he should have gained as the firstborn. So parents, spend some time with your children and teach them the right way.
I want to introduce another level to our discussion. The whole notion of the prophetic. It is not just good enough to observe your children and see what they're doing wrong and have a meeting. That's good, and we should always do that. But what about actually observing in the spirit realm? What about connecting to God and seeing the gifts that your children have and their abilities, and being in touch with God for your children. So it's not just that you're seeing their history and you're seeing their past, but you're seeing their future. And you speak a word over their lives, a positive word. Paul said to Timothy, his son in the faith actually, he said you should war with the prophecies that went before on you, that by them, you might endure and you will live. What about speaking a word? Is there a positive word hanging over your child's life, over your children's life that they could hold on to? Your family meeting should not just be it should not just consist of words of rebuke, which is necessary. But what about words that will shape their future? Speaking into their future and telling them, you will become this. I believe in you. You got to do this. We should conduct meetings like this as well.
Well, there are a whole host of issues. Perhaps I want to take you aboard this ride. A colleague of mine from Trinidad, the twin Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, his firstborn, female, he's dark, so she's very dark. And so he sent her to private school. After the first week, this child came home and he saw his daughter at the sink with every detergent imaginable, and she was washing and washing. He didn't know what it was. But every time he turned, this is Friday afternoon, she was washing. So finally he asked her, honey, what are you doing? She said, I'm trying to get this black out. Everybody in the class is white. I'm trying to get this black out. No. My colleague held his daughter, put her in his lap, sat right there on the floor, and told her of the beauty of the dark pigment and where he came from, his ancestry came from, where she came from, and what she was going to do. For the first time, this young lady, this child, she met people, Caucasian, and it blew her mind. She felt inferior. After that conversation with his daughter, that meeting with her, she never did that again. She's now a distinguished medical doctor. Listen to me. These conversations, these meetings with the family, they're very important. We'll see you next week. This is Choices.
Celebrate Pentecost in the land of Pentecost, Jerusalem. Experience the wonder of the Holy Land and revitalize your spirit with thousands of believers and the world's top spirit-empowered pastors, leaders, scholars, and speakers at the Empowered 21 Global Congress, May 20th to the 25th, 2015. Celebrate Pentecost at Jerusalem 2015. Your life will never be the same.
We thank you for being part of Choices. Remember, you can join us at First Assembly for any of our regular weekly services. I am Celicia on behalf of the set, reminding you that your whole life is the sum of your choices. God bless you.